In the quiet, desolate plains of Los Llanos, whispers of a terrifying legend have long haunted the villagers. This story begins with a boy named Mateo, who lived with his parents in a small, dilapidated house on the edge of town. Mateo adored his mother, a gentle woman with kind eyes, but he harbored a deep, simmering resentment for his father, a brutish man who took out his frustrations on his wife. Night after night, Mateo would hear the sounds of his mother's sobs and the cruel thud of his father's fists. One fateful evening, as the moon cast an eerie glow over their home, Mateo's patience snapped. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, he took up a heavy iron skillet and, with a single, fatal blow, ended his father's reign of terror. His mother, initially shocked, soon fell to her knees, clutching her son and sobbing into his chest. But the respite was short-lived. Mateo's grandfather, a stern and unforgiving man, learned of the incident. He stormed into their home, eyes blazing with fury. "You have brought shame upon this family," he snarled, seizing Mateo by the collar. Without a word of comfort or understanding, he dragged the boy to the outskirts of town, thrusting a tattered bag into his hands. Inside, Mateo found the bones of long-dead animals, a cruel symbol of his impending fate. "You are cursed," the grandfather spat. "May the spirits of the night take you. May you be torn apart by the wild dogs that roam these lands." With that, he kicked Mateo to the ground and left him to his fate. As the night deepened, the howls of hungry wolves echoed through the plains. Mateo clutched the bag of bones, shivering in terror and desperation. Hours passed, and as the moon reached its zenith, a pack of feral dogs appeared on the horizon, their eyes glowing like embers. Mateo's screams pierced the night, but no one came to his aid. From that moment on, the plains of Los Llanos were never the same. Villagers spoke of a ghostly figure wandering the fields, clutching a bag of bones, his eyes hollow and filled with a ravenous hunger. He was seen at the edge of the village, his presence a harbinger of doom. People began to disappear. At first, it was just the occasional wanderer, a lone traveler who strayed too far from the beaten path. Then it was the villagers themselves. They would wake in the dead of night to the sound of bones rattling, and before they could scream, they would be gone, leaving behind nothing but a trail of blood and the distant, mournful wail of Mateo's restless spirit. The villagers tried to fight back. They set traps, carried weapons, and formed nightly patrols. But the ghost was relentless, driven by an insatiable hunger for vengeance. It was said that he would not rest until he had claimed the soul of every last descendant of those who had wronged him. As the years went by, Los Llanos became a ghost town, its streets empty and its homes abandoned. But still, the legend persisted. On nights when the wind howled and the moon was full, one could hear the faint sound of bones rattling and the anguished cry of a boy who would never know peace. And so, the ghost of Mateo continues to haunt the plains, his story a chilling reminder of the darkness that can consume a soul when driven by anger and revenge. And as the villagers whisper among themselves, they know that the spirit is still out there, waiting, hungry, and forever searching for his next victim. As the years slipped by, the tale of Mateo and his cursed revenge became nothing more than a whisper in the wind, carried through the skeletal trees and across the endless plains of Los Llanos. Yet, despite the passage of time, a new fear began to creep into the hearts of the villagers. The ghost of Mateo was not just a vengeful specter, he had grown stronger, more malevolent, and increasingly restless. His hunger for retribution never sated. One stormy night, as lightning split the sky and thunder roared like the wrath of the heavens, the ground trembled beneath the feet of those who still dared to live in Los Llanos. Among them was Elena, a young woman who had recently moved to the village, drawn by the promise of a quiet life away from the chaos of the city. She had heard the tales, the stories of ghosts and curses, but she dismissed them as mere folklore until that fateful night. Elena lay in bed, the rain pelting against the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. Suddenly, she was jolted awake by a chilling sound, the faint rattle of bones, like the whisper of 1,000 dry leaves skittering across the ground. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sat up, the moonlight casting eerie shadows through her window. In the silence that followed, she heard a soft, mournful wail, a sound that seemed to come from the very bowels of the earth. Determined to uncover the truth, Elena grabbed a lantern and ventured outside, the wind howling like a banshee around her. She followed the sound, her footsteps muffled by the wet grass, until she reached the old, abandoned house at the edge of town, Mateo's former home. The door creaked open with a groan, and she stepped inside, the smell of damp wood and decay filling her nostrils. The lantern's glow flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In the dim light, Elena saw a faint, ghostly figure standing in the corner of the room, its eyes hollow, its form indistinct, but unmistakably human. Mateo's spirit was there, and as Elena's eyes met his, she felt a chill that went deep into her bones. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure did not respond, but the rattling of bones grew louder, and the room seemed to close in on her. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, and Elena felt a presence behind her. She turned to see an old, weathered book lying on the floor, its pages yellowed and frayed. The title, barely legible, read "The Curse of Mateo *." Her hands trembling, she picked it up and opened it, her eyes scanning the ancient text. As she read, the room grew colder still. The book spoke of a secret hidden deep within the heart of Los Llanos, a secret that could break the curse and free Mateo's restless spirit. The key, it said, lay in the bones that Mateo had carried, and only by reuniting them with the very essence of his soul could peace be restored. Elena's mind raced. The bag of bones, the one her grandfather had given Mateo, had been lost for generations. But as she turned the final page, a map fell out, its ink faded but still legible. It marked a place deep in the heart of the plains, an old, forgotten burial ground where the bones were believed to be buried. Determined to end the terror once and for all, Elena set out at dawn, the map clutched tightly in her hand. The journey was long and fraught with peril, the landscape eerily silent, save for the distant calls of ravens. When she finally reached the burial ground, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the twisted, ancient trees. There, in the moonlit darkness, Elena began to dig. The earth was hard and unforgiving, but she persisted, her hands raw and bleeding. Hours passed, and just as she was about to give up, her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. With a gasp, she unearthed the bag of bones, its contents now mingled with the soil of centuries past. As she held the bones in her hands, the air around her seemed to shimmer, and a voice, faint but unmistakable, whispered through the night. "Thank you," it said, the voice both haunting and hopeful. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, and the sky filled with a blinding light. Elena felt herself being pulled into a vortex of memories, the anguished cries of Mateo echoing in her ears. The bones in her hands began to glow, the light growing brighter, until it engulfed her entirely. In that moment, Elena knew she had uncovered more than just a curse. She had unearthed the very heart of a tragedy, a tale of love, rage, and forgiveness. When the light finally faded, Elena stood alone in the silent, moonlit field, the bones now silent and still in her hands. The air was calm, the terror that had once gripped Los Llanos seemingly lifted. But as she turned to leave, a faint, ethereal whisper reached her ears. "The curse is broken, but the story is not over." And with that, the legend of Mateo took on a new twist, one that promised even darker secrets and more chilling mysteries yet to be revealed. The plains of Los Llanos remained a place of shadows, the ghost of Mateo now only a part of a much larger, far more terrifying enigma that Elena had unwittingly unleashed. Elena returned to Los Llanos, her mind reeling from the night's events. She hoped that by unearthing the bones and hearing Mateo's ethereal thank you, she had laid his spirit to rest. But as she approached the village, an uneasy feeling settled in her chest. The air felt thick with an unseen presence, and the once vibrant town seemed shrouded in an oppressive silence. Word of Elena's brave act spread quickly among the villagers. They gathered around her, eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear, hoping she had ended their torment. But the elder of the village, an old woman named Isadora, sensed that something was amiss. Her weathered face furrowed with concern as she approached Elena. "Child," Isadora said, her voice trembling with age and wisdom, "you have touched the heart of a great darkness. Mateo's curse was only a part of it. There are forces at play that we do not understand. Elena, though exhausted, felt a surge of determination. What do you mean, Isadora? I thought reuniting the bones would bring peace. Isadora nodded solemnly. It should have, but the curse Matteo carried was not his alone. It was tied to the land, to the blood spilled here long before his time. There are ancient spirits, older and far more malevolent, that have been awakened. The villagers gasped, their faces pale with dread. Isadora continued, her voice a mere whisper. There is a legend, one that speaks of a hidden crypt beneath the plains. It is said to hold the remains of those who first cursed this land, a curse that Matteo unknowingly became a part of. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. How do we find this crypt? How do we end this once and for all? Isadora pointed to the book Elena had found. There are more clues in that book. It speaks of a key, an artifact that can open the crypt. But be warned, child, the path to it is fraught with danger. The spirits will do everything in their power to stop you. Determined? Elena set out once more, this time with a small group of villagers who volunteered to help. Among them was Tomas, a strong and resourceful young man, and Marisol, a healer with knowledge of ancient rituals. Together, they pored over the book, deciphering the cryptic clues that would lead them to the key. The first clue led them to the old church at the center of the village. Built centuries ago, it had fallen into disrepair, its once grand facade now covered in ivy and moss. Inside, they found a hidden compartment beneath the altar, containing an old, ornate dagger inscribed with symbols matching those in the book. Marisol examined the dagger carefully. This is no ordinary weapon. It's a ceremonial blade, used in ancient rites to bind and unbind spirits. It may be the key we need. The next clue took them to an ancient oak tree on the outskirts of Los Llanos. The book spoke of a hidden passage beneath its roots, guarded by a spirit that would test their resolve. As they approached the tree, the air grew colder, and a ghostly figure materialized before them. I am the guardian, it intoned, its voice echoing through the night. To pass, you must prove your worth. Show that your intentions are pure and your heart's brave. Without hesitation, Tomas stepped forward, brandishing the dagger. We seek to end the curse that plagues this land. We come with pure hearts and brave spirits. The guardian studied them for a moment before nodding. Very well. You may pass, but beware. The path ahead is perilous. The ground beneath the tree shifted, revealing a narrow tunnel that descended into darkness. With the dagger in hand and lanterns to light their way, Elena and her companions entered the tunnel, their resolve unwavering despite the unknown dangers ahead. The passage was long and treacherous, winding deep beneath the plains. Strange noises echoed through the darkness, and the air grew thick with a malevolent energy. They encountered traps and spectral apparitions, each test more harrowing than the last. But with Tomas's strength, Marisol's knowledge, and Elena's unwavering determination, they pressed on. Finally, they emerged into a vast, underground chamber. In the center stood a stone altar, surrounded by ancient runes and symbols. Atop the altar lay a cryptic, ornately carved chest, radiating an ominous energy. Elena approached cautiously, the dagger trembling in her hand. "This is it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The key to ending the curse." As she reached out to open the chest, a deafening roar filled the chamber. The spirits of the ancient ones materialized, their eyes burning with fury. "You dare to disturb our rest," they hissed, their voices a cacophony of anger and pain. Elena stood her ground, the dagger held high. "We seek to bring peace to this land. Your curse has caused enough suffering. It must end now." The spirits surged forward, but Tomas and Marisol stepped in front of Elena, their resolve unbreakable. "We stand together," Tomas shouted. "It will not be broken." In that moment, the dagger began to glow with a brilliant light, the ancient symbols on its blade pulsating with power. The spirits recoiled, their forms flickering and fading. Elena plunged the dagger into the chest, and a blinding light erupted from within, enveloping the chamber in a radiant glow. The spirits' anguished cries filled the air, but as the light intensified, they began to fade, their curses unraveling. The ground shook, and the crypt began to collapse, but Elena and her companions stood firm, their hearts filled with hope and determination. When the light finally subsided, the chamber was silent. The chest lay open, its contents revealed a collection of ancient artifacts, the source of the curse that had plagued Los Llanos for centuries. With the dagger's power, they had broken the curse, but the artifacts still held secrets, dark and mysterious. As they made their way back to the surface, the weight of their journey settled upon them. They had ended one curse, but the artifacts hinted at more secrets buried beneath the plains. Los Llanos was safe for now, but the true story was far from over. Elena knew that their victory was only the beginning. The artifacts needed to be studied, their secrets unraveled, and the true history of Los Llanos revealed. She and her companions had become the guardians of this knowledge, and their journey was just beginning. With the dawn of a new day, hope returned to Los Llanos. The villagers emerged from their homes, the fear that had gripped their hearts finally lifting. But Elena and her companions knew that the shadows still lurked beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to rise again. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the plains of Los Llanos held many more secrets, each one more terrifying than the last. And so, their quest continued, a journey into the unknown, driven by a desire to uncover the truth and protect their home from the ancient evils that lay in wait. The legend of Mateo was only the beginning, a prelude to a much larger, far more terrifying story that had yet to be told. Elena and her companions emerged from the crypt, the first rays of dawn casting a warm glow over Los Llanos. The village was abuzz with tentative hope, but Elena's heart was heavy with the knowledge of the artifact's dark secrets. She knew their journey was far from over, but for now, there was a brief, fragile peace. Weeks turned into months, and the villagers began to rebuild their lives. Elena, Tomas, and Marisol devoted themselves to studying the ancient artifacts, trying to understand the true nature of the curse and the spirits that had haunted their land. Each artifact seemed to whisper secrets of a bygone era, hinting at a darkness that stretched far beyond Mateo's tragic story. One night, as a thick fog rolled in, Elena sat alone in her small cottage, poring over the ancient texts that accompanied the artifacts. Her candle flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She felt the chill creep up her spine, the air growing colder with each passing moment. Suddenly, the flame extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. "Elena," a voice whispered, soft and haunting. She turned sharply, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. The room remained silent, save for the soft rustle of pages turning. Elena grabbed a lantern and relit it, the flickering light revealing nothing out of the ordinary. But the feeling of being watched persisted, an oppressive presence weighing heavily on her. Determined to shake off the unease, Elena returned to her work. As she read, a sense of foreboding grew. The text spoke of an ancient entity, a malevolent spirit bound to the land long before Mateo's time. This spirit, it claimed, had orchestrated the curse, feeding off the fear and suffering of the villagers for centuries. "Elena," the voice whispered again, closer this time, sending a shiver down her spine. She stood, clutching the lantern, and slowly turned toward the source of the sound. In the corner of the room, a shadowy figure began to take shape, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The air grew colder still, and the lantern flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. "Who are you?" Elena demanded, her voice barely a whisper. The figure stepped forward, its form becoming more defined. It was a man, or at least, it had once been. His face was twisted in an expression of eternal agony, and his eyes burned with an insatiable hunger. It was Mateo, but something was different, darker. "You freed me," he hissed, his voice a chilling echo. "But you have also awakened him." Elena's breath caught in her throat. "Who?" "The Ancient One," Mateo replied, his form flickering like a dying flame. "He was bound by the curse, but now he is free, and he is hungry." As the words left Mateo's lips, the room seemed to warp and twist. The shadows grew longer, and an overpowering sense of dread filled the air. Elena felt a cold hand on her shoulder, and she spun around to see another figure, this one even more terrifying. It was the ancient entity, its form shifting and writhing like a mass of darkness and despair. "You have freed me," it growled, its voice a cacophony of pain and hatred. "And now, I will consume this land, as I did before." Elena's mind raced. She realized with horror that by breaking Mateo's curse, she had unleashed something far worse. The entity began to spread, its darkness seeping into the walls, the floor, the very air itself. The village was no longer safe. "You cannot stop me," the entity hissed. "I am eternal." Desperate, Elena grabbed the dagger, its blade still glowing faintly with the remnants of its power. She plunged it into the shadowy form, but it only seemed to laugh, a sound that chilled her to the core. "You think a mere dagger can harm me?" it mocked. "I am beyond your reach." As the darkness closed in, Elena felt a cold, creeping terror unlike anything she had ever known. The entity's presence was overwhelming, suffocating. She could hear the distant cries of the villagers as the darkness spread, consuming everything in its path. In her final moments, Elena realized the true horror of what she had unleashed. The ancient entity was not bound by physical forms or simple curses. It was a primordial force of malevolence, a darkness that had existed since time immemorial, and it was hungry. The last thing she saw was the entity's eyes burning with an eternal hunger, as it whispered, "You are mine." And then, silence. The village of Los Llanos was never seen again. Travelers who ventured into the plains found nothing but a vast, empty wasteland, devoid of life. The story of Elena, Mateo, and the ancient entity became a cautionary tale, whispered by those who dared to remember, a reminder that some darknesses should never be disturbed. And on nights when the fog rolled in thick and the wind howled through the trees, one could still hear the faint, haunting whisper of a name lost to time, echoing through the desolate plains. Elena,